Okay, so let's get started on our colour version of today's painting. McDonnell Ranges Landscape. So this is in Australia, beautiful spot. Never been there. I'd love to go out there and have a look around and get some really beautiful photos. Maybe even paint out there would be amazing. All right, so I'll put my sketchbook away for the next time. Got your palette of colours ready to go. So make sure when you are painting something, try to keep your palette separate from the rest of your paints. That way you won't have to remember what you used. I'm just playing around with this light. No, okay, I'm just going to stay right with that now. And you've got your reference photo or your notes to refer to. So we're going to draw this up just like we did before with the charcoal using the grid method. This time I'll use a ruler because I do want to get it right. So this is a Colourfix piece of pastel paper. It measures 23 by 30. The area that we're painting into is 23 by 30. The actual size is about 25 by 32-ish. Anyway, I always go by the size of the painted area. So 23, so that's 11.5 is halfway. So I'll put my grid lines on there and rule that down there. I'm just using charcoal because I can see it easily and it's easy to cover with pastels and it's also really easy to get off. 15 is halfway, so that's 30 and then 15. And just drawing my line across there. When you've done that, make sure you just leave a little mark on your margin so that you can find those halfway lines later on. If you're looking for them after you've filled up your page and you can't see the grid anymore, if you've still got these little points as reference points, you can have a look at that and work out where things need to sit. So that's my page gridded up. And I'm going to use a smaller piece of charcoal and I'm going to draw it up just like we did before. Again, breaking it into quarters. So this top left quarter is quite simple. I'm just doing the outline. I'm starting my rock face up here on the top left, and it will intersect at about there on my grid line. So that means I can just join the dots here and do a little jagged edge to indicate rocks and trees and things. And that's pretty much all I need to put into that section there. Unless, of course, you want to mark in your tree, which comes up to about here and it sort of fills up that area there. So you can loosely put things in like that that you might want to have to refer to. But for now, we'll just do the outline. Then we'll move over into the other quarter. So just looking at this top right-hand quarter now and the beautiful shape through that. So you can see this beautiful negative space shape through that area there. So remember we had this little bit of rock jutting out down on this area and then it went back in on that grid line and then back out again and down. So where does it intersect when it comes back in? I'm going to say around about there-ish. If you want to measure, you can measure. So that means that from here to here, we've got this little bit of rock that sort of sticks out and comes back in like that. Again, it's just a loose shape, okay? No hard lines, no straight lines. Then it dips in and it comes out and it's almost a rectangle with a bit of a funny corner, comes down like that into that section there. So that's this area here, this little bit of rock here comes down to there. Then we can come back up to the top on the right-hand side, work out where that comes in. So it's at about there. And then it dips down, has a little round section and then pops out to there. So that point there, where that area of rock comes out, we can work out where that sits. And as we said earlier, it's just slightly higher than this point here. So you can grab a ruler if that's easier. Put your ruler down like that and say, well, if that's there, then it's probably about there. So just a little bit higher. So now I can do this and just draw that shape in there like that, very roughly. I need an eraser now to fix up my mess. See how easy charcoal comes off? It's really lovely. So nice. Bit better than pastel. Pastel sticks to this, which is meant to do. So if you want to remove it, sometimes it's a bit tricky. Oh, sorry, I'll leave that there. And then I can bring this line down here. And again, that comes to about the same level as this little dip here. So about to there-ish. So then I can do this pointy bit up here, follow the shape down to there like that. And then this section comes out down to about there. So we've got this nice little slope that comes out like that, down to there. So that's that area there. So you can see the negative shape or the negative space is the shape of the sky outlining those rocks. Rather nice. Now we can move down into the bottom right-hand quarter. So we're moving around the page in a clockwise direction. I'm going to start over here on the left side and see where this piece needs to come down to in the picture and then across. So it comes down to about that far, I reckon, about to there. It's almost the same distance of rock above that halfway line as there is below. So looking at things like that as well. So how much rock is above it, how much is below it, and the center line seems to sit right in the middle. So we can kind of say, all right, well, that's good. That comes to about there. And then the water line is not quite straight. It's on a slight angle, something like that. I think it might be too much, but we'll try it and see. Something like that. So it's on a slight angle. So that's your water line on these rocks here on the left. The rocks on the right, remember that back section there sits slightly higher than this one. So it comes to about there. So it comes out like that to about there. And it sort of continues around. There's actually land or something that comes around there. So that's where the end of the water is in that section there. And all these little trees are growing up from there. So you can just put a few marks in there to indicate your trees. Don't need to put them in yet because we've got to do the sky first. And then this comes across sort of like that in a little bit of a dip, all these jagged rocky edges that come down like that. So it's not a hard straight line. There's a few little breaks in it. And if you have your picture up big on a screen or next to you on an iPad or a phone, you can zoom in and have a look at the information there, the detail of that just there. And then we've got the other rock that comes down from up in this corner to about there. And it's also slightly in front of this one. So it comes down a little bit lower. And then we've got the water's edge on that one there. It's quite dark in there, so it's hard to see all the information. So I'm just going to say that's what's going on. Probably not quite that low, but anyway, that'll do for now. We can always move it up a bit if we need to. So they're our main lines that we've drawn in for that section there. The rest of this area in this quarter is sort of soft, isn't it? It's kind of got all these beautiful ripples of water through them and shadow on the right and the left. We'll leave that for now. We don't need to mark that in with the charcoal just yet. We can look at that with the pastels. So let's move over into the last quarter. So that's the bottom left quarter, and we're going to continue this line across here. Comes across like that. Remember our tree that stands up here, so that's going up into the top left quarter. And then we've got a little bit of an island feeling through here. So the land here comes up a little bit higher, and then it dips down, and we've got grass to about there. I think, yeah, that's about there. So that's that little bit of sandbank or land that we can see through there that sits in front of the rocks, and grass to there. And then in front of that is quite dark also in the water. So we've got some dark areas through there. And then down in the foreground, we've got the grasses, which we'll put in last, but you can put a few marks there just to feel happy about putting something in there for now. So that's basically our outline and our drawing. And this is a really great way to start your painting. So just look at your outlines, look at your edges of everything, and get your main structures and shapes in place. After that, it's all about blocking in your colours and then working out what colours go where according to the tones. Okay, so as I said earlier, make sure you've got that picture close by that you can just, you know, divert your eye over and find it really easily. And also have your black and white version there, because that'll help you decide or determine where the lights and the darks are. So having your notes and your images nearby is really helpful. Okay, so now we can start to look at some colours. We're going to block in from the sky down. So we'll do the sky first, and the reason for that is because it's behind everything. It's much easier to do the things that are behind and work forward with pastels than it is to go back. So I know a lot of oil painters might do a landscape, they'll do a tree or something, and then they might put the sky in afterwards. For us as pastelists, that's a bit of a disaster, unless you work like an oil painter and keep your marks quite loose. But when you do smooth work and realism like I do, it's much easier to start at the back and work forward. So I'm going to begin at the top with my darker blue. Okay, that's my sky blue. And then I've got my lighter blue to put down here in the base, and also a little bit up here to suggest clouds. The clouds are not very obvious in this picture. They're very soft and hardly there. So we don't want to focus too much on them, unless, of course, you want to make a cloudy sky. Up to you. You can actually do whatever you want. Before I do that, though, because I'm going to put some light blue in here, I want to just, and dark blue, I just want to remove those grid lines a little bit so that I can not worry too much about them getting in the way. So you can use your kneadable eraser and just take your grid lines out. Keep those little marks on the margin so that you can work out where they went. If you lose them later on, you need to refer back to them. But sometimes it's easier to remove them. It's a little bit less distracting. So when you block in, what you want to do is put your pastel piece flat on your page like that. So if you buy long sticks of pastels, you'll have to break them, because the long sticks are far too long to do this kind of thing with easily, unless you're doing a huge painting. But for this size, I like to use sticks that are about that long, which is, if I find my ruler, about 2.5 centimeters or an inch. About an inch long is a really good size. Lie it flat, and we're just going to block in all the sky area. If you want to overlap, or not if you want to, it's better to overlap those lines of the rocks so that we don't get a halo or a gap between the rocks and the sky. We want to make sure that that the sky sits behind the rocks. So you're going to have to go over those edges a little bit. Okay, so blocking in like that, the first layer. So this is called blocking in. This is what you do when you first begin, because what we need to do is get pastel on the paper so we've got something to work with. Okay, so just pushing this in with my finger. I'm just going to push it in like this, and then I'll put another layer over the top so it'll become nice and thick and rich blue. Now, if you've got blue paper and you want to use that as your sky, then you might want to leave it plain or just put some light in there where the lightest parts are. That's up to you. See, the beauty of pastels is you can always use the paper colour as part of your painting. And it's a beautiful thing to do, especially if you're doing very loose, abstract kind of work and relying on the paper colour. Okay, so that's the sky pushed in, first layer. Now I'm going to come back over and I'm going to add more, because I want to get more pastels onto the paper. I want to fill it all up and make it really thick and lovely. So often one layer isn't enough. You'll need to add a couple. Okay, so now I'm going to come in and I'm just going to start to really push that in to get it nice and blue. I know it looks a bit too blue at the moment, but once we come back with our lighter blue over the top, it'll start to look a little bit different. And you might like the really blue, so up to you. You might want to have a sunrise here. You can do whatever you want in the sky. It's up to you. And that's the lovely thing, isn't it? When you find a reference picture, sometimes something about it might not be quite what you want to do. For example, the sky or the light or whatever. So you have the ability to change it. And that's the good thing about doing art, because you can create things to suit you and change them the way you want them to be. So I've pushed in my blue. That's lovely. And now I'm going to get my light blue, which looks like a white, but it's actually a very pale blue. And I'm going to put some of that down here at the bottom, because that's where the lightest blue is. Okay, so again, just blocking some of that light blue in, and now I'm going to blend it into the other blue so that it now becomes a lighter blue. And as I blend it and move my finger up into the rest of the sky, hopefully it'll sort of go from light to the darker blue, just naturally. See? Lovely variation there. So when we put the rocks in front of this, the lightness of that sky will really pop. I want that spot there to be quite bright, because we've got to reflect it in the water. And so the water's got to have the same tone in there to indicate the light of the sky. So that's quite nice. And I like how that's merging gently up into the other blue. So just keep running your finger around where the edges meet, basically, and just run your finger up into the blue, and that will gently, gently just merge that light into the dark without a hard line or a definite area of change. And when I do that, I keep my finger on the paper. So you can see I haven't lifted it off. I'm literally just rubbing and going higher and higher until I get to the darker blue, and it's looking lovely and dark. So I find the best way to get a really smooth finish like that is to keep my finger on the page. Don't keep lifting up and doing this sort of thing, because when you do that, it looks uneven and you don't get a nice even finish. However, if you want to do that to make clouds, that's a different story. So for a smooth blue sky, we want to have smooth markings or smooth movement. Now I'm going to put a little bit of this blue up here just for some clouds. So what I'm doing is lightly rubbing a bit of that light blue up through there. Right? I'm keeping it sort of, trying to keep it fairly random. I don't want it to be too same. Now, to make clouds, they already look fairly cloudy. But what I'm going to do now is put my finger in and just rub it around in soft little circles like this. And you can lift up and down with this one because you want some variation in the tone. So what's happening is I'm softly rubbing this in very gently, little round circular movements with my finger to try and create that natural look of a cloud. You know how they have some light areas and some dark areas, and they just vary a lot, don't they? For a white cloud, there's a lot of different tones through that. So I just want to do that really softly. I'm not pushing very hard either, so I'm sort of letting some of that lighter blue sit on top of the darker blue. I want it to sit on top. If I push it in hard, it'll just all blend in and get a bit lost. But if you go lightly like this, just softly running your finger around, then you'll create that really soft, gentle little cloudy effect. If you feel like you want to add a little bit more cloud, you can come back in with your light blue again and just put some dabs here and there. See how I'm using it on its side so I don't get a hard mark, but I'm just rubbing it sort of randomly, and I'm tilting it a little bit so I'm getting more pressure on one end than the other, and that's going to help to create those lovely random shapes in the clouds. So you can see already it's starting to look quite cloudy and natural. So that's the secret. You've got to vary the pressure so that you get a harder or stronger colour or tone and lighter tone. So you need a range of the both. falling over my words a bit today. There we go. So that looks quite nice, and I think I might leave that as it is. So you can potentially do that, or you can make it more stormy looking. You can have no clouds at all, up to you. You get to choose the kind of sky you want. But I quite like how those clouds are sitting up there. It's just something a little bit more interesting than plain blue sky. So that's pretty much the sky done. We don't have to touch that again. And at this point, you want to be looking at the sky and thinking to yourself, am I happy with that? Is the cloud looking the way I want it to look? Am I really pleased with how that's happening? If not, keep working on it. If you are happy, then you can move on to the next part and leave the sky as is. So this is the hard part, because you think, maybe I've changed my mind. If you do, you can come back and change it. You can amend it. But just be aware that it's much easier to get it done now and finish it off, because otherwise it's a bit hard to get in behind everything, especially because we're going to be coming in, the rocks are going to be all darker colours. So we'll be using a lot of the browns and the oranges and the purples and things. Now, if you're going to try and get sky around those rocks afterwards, it's going to be really difficult, because you'll be picking up all the dark colours from the rocks that are underneath. So try not to do that to yourself, basically. Just going to tip off some of my dust. If you're on an easel, your dust should be just dropping down into the little channel at the bottom. But I'm sitting flat today at my desk, so I've got to keep tipping it off, otherwise it won't sort of go away and it gets in the way. All right, so next we've got to look at these rocks. We'll start on the right side, because that's the darker side, and we'll get all this in here. But first we're going to block it in, okay? So we're going to block it in with our brown. That's your darker brown, not your dark purple, but your darker brown that you picked up. And we'll all have different browns, because we've all got different pastels. So if it's not the same as mine, don't stress. Oh, and I meant to say before, if you don't have a very light blue like I had, you might want to use a bit of white and just sort of mix it in a bit more with the blue. And that way you'll create a light blue on your page, because we mix colours on paper, not on a palette with pastels. So with this brown, I'm going to block in the whole shape of the rocks first. Then we can come back in and we can add some lights and darks to get that variation of the texture of it in there, and really look at where it's darkest and lightest, etc. So get your brown, and I'm going to just draw that outline again lightly. Hopefully you can still find it. If not, just check back at your photo. And we've already done it twice, so it's always a little bit easier when you've done something more than once. Draw your outline in like that with your brown. And then we're going to lie it down on its side. Again, I've got a piece that's about 1 inch or 2.5 centimetres long. Lie it down here and just wipe it over this area where I want to get all the under blocked in brown for my rocks. It doesn't matter if the edges are a bit fuzzy, because they are anyway. Okay, so that's how they are already, so it doesn't really matter. Cool. While I've got this in my hand, I'm an economy person. I like to sort of get something done twice if I can. I'm just going to do the same thing on this side. So again, drawing in your outline just lightly with your brown, and then we're going to block it all in. And then once you've got your outline drawn like that, just want to lie it down flat again and block it in. Big, bold movements, filling all of that in with your brown. Don't press too hard, because we want to leave room, or you want to leave too thin the paper to add more pastel over the top of this. So we start off nice and light. Okay, if you press really hard, then you fill up the tooth of the paper quite quickly, and then you'll find you won't be able to get any more on. And because we work in layers with pastel, in this style of painting, we want to make sure that we are able to add more later on. With this paper, I find with an art spectrum paper and art spectrum pastels, I can probably get about 5 or 6 layers on before I need to fix it or wet it. Okay, now we've got that in, let's push it all in with your fingers. So just be careful around the edges to not get your brown into your sky. Try to stay inside the lines if you can. And I just look at the pad of my finger and try to keep it just inside the lines, because what we don't want when we've done this is an outline around everything that looks like we've drawn a stick figure thing. So we want to make sure we get those edges to blend in with the rest of it and not look like we've drawn them in. Okay, so just pushing that in with your fingers. If you get a bit of it down here in the bottom, don't stress too much because we'll have to put some shadows in the water anyhow. Just running around like that. Beautiful. Pushing it in. And you might find some areas feel like they need a bit more pastel. They're not quite filling up. Other areas might feel a bit fuller. Same on the other side. So pushing it all in. Getting quite a lot of dust sitting on the edges there, but I can tip that off after. Pushing, pushing, pushing. Notice we're working down from top to bottom on this picture. And when you're pushing it in, kind of just vary the direction that you're running your fingers. So don't go all horizontal or all up and down. Just kind of run around it in different directions, because this rock is made up of different shapes and they all run in different directions. We want to try and begin to think about that and how you move your finger around on the paper. We want to create the randomness of the shapes. So if you're moving your finger just up and down, up and down, up and down, then it's all going to look too uniform. So try to push your finger around in different shapes. Do squiggly shapes, up and down, round and round, that kind of thing, until it's all pushed in. You should probably just push in where that tree is going to sit because it's quite dark behind it. And we'll just put that in.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm putting the colours on my paper, but the paper doesn't seem to be wanting to accept it, like it's leaving a lot of the paper colour underneath, and I've tried 2 different colours on it.
What sort of paper have you got, Karen?
It's the arts. It's Canson.
Is that the Métiers?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not quite as grippy as this paper.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it has a
Okay.
rough and smooth side, doesn't it?
Oh, does it? Okay.
Yeah. If
Probably
you're on the
picked up
smooth
side.
side, you might find it's not quite hanging on to it.
Okay.
The
Yep.
rough side looks like a chicken wire pattern. And
That's what this is. That's
yeah,
coming that chicken wire pattern.
yeah. And what kind of pastels have you got?
The art spectrum ones.
Art spectrum, yeah. So the art spectrums are quite not hard, but they're kind of dry.
Right.
And so they don't hang on to that paper quite as well as they do onto this paper.
Right.
So,
okay. That's
yeah,
good to know.
yeah,
That's all right. I'll just make do and then I'll do it again on the other one and give that a try.
yeah.
Yeah.
If people get all uptight about the pastels that you need, but it's actually the paper that's the key.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
really interesting. Good to know.
yeah, paper's important.
Yeah.
And I actually used that Métiers paper for years before I even discovered this. And
Right.
yeah, I did find that it was quite hard to fill.
Yeah, because I know when I was doing it with the other paper, it was going on just like yours does.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
okay.
that'll be why.
That's
Yeah,
good to know. Great. Thanks, Jenny.
no worries. All good. So yes, if you have any queries like that, just let me know. But paper is really important. I can't stress that enough. And as I just said to Karen, I did use the Métiers for years and years because it was all I knew. It was all the art shop had that I used to go to. So, you only know what you know, don't you? But I won't use it now. I don't like it. It doesn't do what I want it to do. But it's good for practice. So throw it away. It's really good for practicing, for your drawing and just your blending and your different marks and things like that. So, there's always a use for it. Okay, so we've blocked in all the rocks with our brown. That's our kind of our mid brown, I guess. So when you block in with a mid color like this, it means that you can then use your darks and your lights to create all the textures. I'm just going to tip off my dust again. And I've got a little cloth here underneath my board so that I can tip the dust off onto the cloth, and then I can take it outside later and get rid of it. So try not to blow it. That's the only thing. It's really difficult not to blow it, especially if you're old school and used to use erasers in school, and you'd always, rub something out and then blow it off your paper. So it's just second nature to want to blow it off. But by all means, you can if you want to. It's just going to put pastel dust all through your house, which is not ideal. All right, so we've blocked in the mid-tones. Now I want you to grab your dark purple or your blue violet or whatever it is, whatever that purple is that you're going to use. And we're just going to zhoosh a bit of it over on the right side, but not everywhere. So just notice where it's darkest. There's a few little dark patches there. And if you look at the black and white version, it might be easier to find. But I can see there's a few dark lines. There's a dark line indicating that rock that comes forward, and it sort of helps to separate it from the big rock behind it. So just noticing that sort of thing. And as I said, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on detail this time for this class, because we'll be here for a week otherwise. I'm actually painting something similar to this at the moment, and it is taking ages because I'm doing every little crease and crevice in all the rocks, and it's a very consuming operation. So we're not going to do that today. We're just going to sort of mark in some of the dark areas like that. All right, and then it'll start to get a life of its own. And while you've got your dark purple in your hand, just move over to the other side. So you can see the base of all of this big rock on the left has a lot of dark in it around the bottom because there's shadow there. So I'm going to get that nice and dark and delicious in there. Remember, if you want something to be lighter, you've got to add the darks. Okay, so don't be afraid of the dark. It'll make the lights pop. Cool. Remember I said behind that tree on the left is quite dark. So I want to get that nice and dark in there so that that tree sort of pops forward and catches the sun when we pop it in. And then there's a few little dark spots around, not too many on this side. There's smaller and there's fewer on this side. So bring that up a bit higher there. And just a few little crevices and suggestions of shadows and things around in this one. So just put a few in. What we're going to do next is push it all in softly, and we'll start to create some tones, or some shadows, I should say. Okay, so once you've got that on there, then I want you to get your finger again and just start to push it around, but don't press too hard. What we want to do is try and get to some of this dark to kind of sit on the surface and not get pushed in too much, so that we can still see the brown and the purple together, separate but together. Okay, and again, varying the direction that you pull your finger in. So just look at those shadow shapes and move your finger in the direction that they are running, and that will help to create the beautiful shadows that we can see, especially on this right hand side. It's a lot darker on the right hand rocks than it is on the left. There we go. I've got some leftover dark on my fingers, so I'm just going to pop some of that down here in the water, because we'll be putting it in there anyway after. Okay, so that's starting to give me a nice bit of shadow happening through there on that right side. And I'm going to come back there over onto the left side and do the same sort of thing, just softly, softly running your finger around, looking at the shapes and trying to sort of follow those shapes with your finger so that you're creating all the little crevices and all the little bits of rock that poke out and sit behind each other, cause all these lovely shapes to happen. And then we can come back over again with our mids and start to get some texture going on. This is the underpainting stuff. Okay, tip off my dust. I really like how this dark here pops out against the light sky. That's very nice. I might tip the dust the other way actually, because if you keep going top ways, it'll land in my sky and then I'll end up with dirty sky, which is already starting to happen a little bit. So that's another point. If you're tipping dust off like I am, tip it off towards the bottom, because see how it's all caught in the sky there? Got little bits of brown and purple through my sky. If I touch it, it's just going to make it all messy. So I'm just going to leave it there for now. Okay, so what have we got over here? I've got a brown and I've got red. See what red does. I'm going to put a bit of red over in here just for fun. Red warms things up a little bit. Just looking at the shapes. So what I'm trying to do is look at the shapes of the rocks in here and try to sort of draw or dab those shapes on that you can see. Now, if you lose some of your darks, don't stress. We can put more dark back in. So this is the beauty of pastels. You can always add more. So it's not the end of the world if you go over something and it's not quite the way you wanted it to be. You can always bring more back in. What I'm trying to do with the reds and the browns on this side is keep everything kind of mid-tone, because I want to save those beautiful light colors for the other side, because that's where the light's hitting. That's the highlight. That's the wow part on the rocks. So I want to save the light tones, which are my oranges and apricots, to use over there, and sort of keep this side a little bit more in shadow and quieter, so it doesn't dominate too much. Okay, so I know there are some lighter parts in there, and I'll have to maybe find another color to see what we can do about that. But I'm just keeping this right-hand side of the rocks kind of muted, I guess, quieter. I'm going to pop a bit of green in and see what happens. Might be too green, don't know. I'm just looking at tones now. So all the colors I've used, the red and the green and the brown, are all a similar tone. How can you tell? All right, I know they're different colors, but they're a similar tone. The best way to tell is to squint your eyes and look through your eyelashes, and you can see that they all look about the same shade or tone, okay, even though they're the same color. That's why red and green are often hard to distinguish, because they're a very similar tone or value, okay? Now, if you picked up your light blue just for fun and did the same exercise, you'll see that the light blue looks much lighter through your eyelashes when you squint. So that's a great way to determine your tones. And I can see with my purple there, if I squint through my eyelashes, the purple's a much darker tone than those other three. So it's a really good way to figure out what your tones are. So these are all mid-tones. There's a dark green, which is probably too dark. I'm going to throw a bit of that in there too. Don't be afraid to try colours that might not actually be in the rocks, because sometimes it kind of looks amazing. So I'm just dabbing a bit of this darker green around, and that's creating some lovely shadows too. So I'm really focusing on the darks and the mids on this side. I don't want too much light. I'm going to come back in with more dark. And I'm just trying to distinguish those really dark sort of crevices to help the rocks takes shape. So we can see that there's this rock here in the front, and then this one here is a separate sort of area. So we need to make sure that that's that dark part through there so that this guy can come forward, and it's also lower on the page or below the waterline, a lower waterline on that one. So just a few more dark parts. If you find your darks aren't dark enough, then you might want to go and find something else. I can't get much darker than this. I'd have to go to black if I want to go much darker. So I just still want to keep that fairly neutral on this side. I'm going to come back in with my brown now. So don't be afraid to sort of move between all your different colours or tones that you've used already. So I know we put this brown down first because that was our base colour, but I can now put that back in over some areas to strengthen up the brown a little bit more. I feel like I need to get something slightly lighter. I might try this ochre-y colour. It might be too much, but we'll see what happens. Not bad, not too bad. I might just leave that there and see what we think afterwards. Sometimes you just don't know if something's too bright or too dark or whatever. So put it on anyway, and then when you get to the end or close to the end, you can reassess. Because this area doesn't have anything in front of it in the picture, I can come back in here and change things quite easily later on if I need to. So think about that too. What's easily accessible that I can adjust or change if I want to later on. I feel that's a little bit too light, but there is definitely some light edges and points and parts in there. So I'm just going to stick with it for now because I think it might work. See how we go. Everything's very undoable. So don't stress too much if it's, not looking right. And I'm just going to softly dab some of this in now because I want to kind of blur it off a little bit. I don't want all of this information to be too strong because I want the sunny side to shine more. So I want to mute this down a little bit. When you want to mute things down without mixing the colours too much on the paper, just dab it with your finger. Just dabbing like that. It pushes the pigment into the paper and just sort of mutes it down a little bit so that it's not too bright. Because what's happening is as I'm dabbing, I'm picking up colour from the paper and then I'm putting it back down again. So I'm sort of picking up the darks and putting them over the lights, and it's making everything a little bit more muted and dull. And that's okay, that's good. Cool, cool. And then I might just grab my purple again and just look at those darks again. So just now starting to look at the detail, really looking at the shapes. The problem with painting this sort of thing is it's so recognizable. People have been there and they know what it looks like. So you've got to try pretty hard to get, the shapes right at least so people can recognize it. There we go, nice. So I reckon that might do for that side. Otherwise, we'll be here for a month of Sundays getting all the little details in there. Keep it nice and loose. Lovely. And we might have to just sharpen up some of these edges, the forward ones that are closest to us, just so we can determine the structure of the rocks. So something like that. See how that brightened up that section there? So it sort of brings it forward a little bit and defines it from the rock behind it. It's this bit here. And as I said, you can always change it if you don't like it. You can always use a different colour, push it in, get rid of it, all sorts of things. So that's the good thing about pastels. You can actually, push it all in and then put more over the top. You can fix it with a spray fixative. That will give you a lot more tooth. So if you do find you fill your paper up really quickly, you can't get any more on, give it a spray with some fixative, and that will set it basically. So then you've got another round. You can actually add more. So that's a really good option too if you need to keep working on your painting. And often when I'm signing my paintings, if I've got a lot of pastel on there and I can't get the pencil to work, because often the pencil won't because the pastel's so thick, I'll just spray that corner with fixative, and then that sets everything underneath it, and then I can put my pencil over the top and sign it. So you can see I've got a fair bit of dirt in my sky now, which is a shame, and but I should be able to touch it up at the end just with the pastels to get rid of those, but I'll tip off my dust. There we go. All right, so I'm going to just grab my charcoal. Charcoal is also really great to use with pastels, and when you want to get some harder marks in, like definite lines, so pastel pencil or charcoal is really good when you want to get a line in. So for instance, this is not all soft and woolly, it's hard and you know, rough. So I just want to get a few sharp lines in there to indicate that, so that it doesn't look like it's all furry. So you can use charcoal or pastel pencils or pastels if you've got a nice hard sharp one. This is because charcoal is not too black either, so it's a good option when you're just kind of feeling your way around. So just putting a bit more of that line work in there just helps to make it look a bit more rocky, I think. See, I'm a details girl. I can't help myself. I've just got to do that. Anyway, that'll do for now, I think. We'll move over to the other side. Cool. All right, while I've got the charcoal in my hand, I'm just going to mark out a couple of areas over here of very definite shapes. So can you see there's a definite shape down the side here? This edge of it is catching the light, but it's got all these sort of horizontal lines through it like that, which a lot of that rock face has. And there's a dark area in there. So I'm just using the charcoal to mark out some of the shapes within the shape, basically. So it's a really good way just to feel your way around the picture and draw in some of those definite marks. So then you can focus on the lights and the darks and getting them to really work well. Okay, then up here we've got a few different shapes up there. So just noticing the shapes, getting those marks in there to help you find your way around it. If charcoal's not working, then you might want to try pastel, a darker pastel, pencil, something like that. I like the charcoal because it's soft and I can go over it. I can sharpen things up with it. Just make some nice marks. I'm just blocking in the darker areas within this rock face. There's a few rocks up there that look like stairs, stairways. It's interesting. So see how I'm just doing that, marking in shapes, just so I'm making a bit of a map for myself so that when I come back with my other colours and tones, I've sort of got a bit of a direction. I know where I'm going to go. A little line like that through there, and down through there. Okay. That's probably enough information, and now I can start to build on that. I'm just going to tip off my charcoal dust. Doing that lightly really helps because then I'm going to get my this light apricot color. A bit frightening, isn't it? And I'm just going to mark in some of those sharp edges that have some light on them. So this is a little square. It's called Blue Earth is the brand, and they're lovely pastels. They're very creamy. And because it's got a hard edge on it like that, I can just sort of touch the edge down and try to get that little bit of sunshine on the edges of my rocks like that. See how that glows? It's quite lovely, isn't it? So if you've got a pastel that's round, like this orange one, for instance, if it's got a round end on it, you can still do the same thing. Just hold it as if you were going to put it down flat, but tilt it. So you've just got the edge touching the paper. That means it's not a hard, sharp line. It'll be a softer, sort of wider mark. And that will allow you to get a bit of light in there without making too hard a mark. So I'm just noticing where it's light. If you want to follow along with me and map out the light bits, then we can start to sort of just block in the darker bits around it. So just keep your mark fairly loose. You don't have to press too hard. We can always come back over and define things if you need to. So I can just see there's lots of little bits of rock that are catching the light here and there. Because they're bumpy, they're all catching the light on the ends or the tips or the edges. So there's nothing, straight and perfect here. It's all a bit messy. We can come back over that with our browns and our oranges. So where's my brown? I feel like I need something in between brown and the light. Maybe it's that ochre. Let's try that. This ochre color, kind of in between. So I can see there's some shapes through there, like that. And this is just a really short, fat bit, and I've got a smooth edge, or I'm just using the side of it to sort of pull it along like this and try to get those shapes of those, almost stripes, aren't they, through that rock face up there. And as I said, we're not going to spend a bunch of time getting all the detail perfect. It's really just about marking in the tones to give the impression of the rock. And where I want it to be slightly lighter but not too light, I can just wipe this beautiful ochre colour over that purple, and it creates a really nice muddy sort of colour. It's a bit yummy. And don't be afraid to mix your colours on your paper. That's what it's all about. So I've done a bit of that. So that's with my ochre and my apricot catching the light. And you can see compared to the one on the right, it's a lot lighter and brighter. It's got a bit more contrast in it. Now I'm going to come back over with my brown and just do the same sort of movements through here to try to get the feeling of the hard rock. Keeping it loose. Don't stress too much about the detail. Use the pastels to kind of blend with each other too. So when you get to this point, you don't want to be sticking your fingers into it too much to make it smooth and beautiful, because it's not smooth. And it also mixes the colours too much if you blend them with your fingers. So using the pastels themselves to just push the colour around like this is a really nice way to mix your colours on your paper. and it keeps it sort of pure without getting too much mud in there. So I've just gone back over with brown, and now I'm going to come back in with some dark. So I'm going to use my blue violet, which is like it's similar to the purple, but it's slightly darker, I think. It's a little bit more, a bit blacker than the purple. So I just want to make that really dark down through there. Because what we want to do is make this water pop. The water is the beautiful, shiny, light, yummy part that's reflecting the sky. And so to make the water look light, we need to get enough dark around it. So the blue violet is a really good option if you want to try and get some nice, strong darks in through here. So I'm just going to put a few little dark marks around like that to indicate, you know, the differences in the rocks. Popping a bit of dark in there. The light won't shine without the dark, so you've got to have your darks. Getting there. So it's starting to come alive, isn't it? We'll have to add more light, of course, to bring the lights back in, but we need to get some darks in there as well. There's a few little shrubs and trees up in the top of this rock face. So that's cute. That's fun. We can add a bit of greenery in there, which will be nice. Just keeping your marks fairly loose. Just looking at the shapes, making sure that you know, put your pastel down in the direction that these things are moving in or running in. A lot of horizontal rock there. Don't forget there's also verticals, because that's where the rock, you know, stops and starts. It's got all the different joins and bits and pieces in it. Okay. So once you've got some darks in there, I'm going to come back in with my apricot now. That's my light. So at this point, this is my lightest color. I might want to go lighter, but I'm just going to see if this will be enough to highlight some of those really light sections that are catching the sun. I'm just being quite deliberate about where I put these marks now. So we're sort of starting to refine things a little bit and get a bit more deliberate about the marks. Just noticing all the edges, and remember too, that they're not all even and they're not all the same shape or size. So try to vary the mark as much as you can to keep it as natural looking as you can. We also don't want to overdo the lights, because that way it'll be too saturated. So you've got to make sure you vary it without doing too much. So sometimes less is more. You just want to keep it quite simple. Something like that. See how it's starting to take shape now? You can nearly see the crevices and the dips and twists in amongst the rocks there. I'm going to pick up my orange now and just see what that does. It's, let me check the tones, a little bit darker than the apricot. So I can add a little bit of it here and there, just for some variation in the light. Lovely. It's starting to come together finally. Takes a while sometimes, doesn't it? You think, oh my goodness, is this ever going to work? But you've got to keep going. Don't give up. Because it does in the end. You just got to stick with it and persevere. So I think I might leave that where it is for now. And we can always come back and touch things up if we need to at the end or afterwards. If you feel like you want to spend some more time in this section. It's not going to be difficult to do because again, the only thing that's in front of these rocks is the tree down the bottom there. So that's not too much of an obstacle, which is good. And we might just throw a little bit of greenery up in here for fun. So see up in here, we've got a bit of tree. I'm just using my dark greens, not the darkest. And then I'll pop a bit of light green over the top. A few little trees up on the edge there, just poking up, just to break that line a little bit, soften it off. Doesn't hurt, does it? I like adding a bit of greenery here and there, it's nice. So that's a bit of darker green through there. And I might grab my mid green now and just add a bit over the top to create a bit of light in there. So just zhooshing that around. Just use, again, I'm holding it on a almost flat, but tilting it so that I've got the one end of the pastel on the paper. And I'm just doing little dabs, little dabby sort of marks to indicate, you know, the trees. We don't need to put every leaf in there. They're too far away. We can't see them. So just keep it simple. We just want to suggest them. That's all we need to do for this part of it. Okay, and then over where the two rocks meet, I'll just tip my dust off before I get any further on. One moment. So down in the middle, down in here, where the rocks meet, just want to lighten that up a little bit more. Okay, now I can see trees in there too. So we talked about that earlier. Just got to make sure I've got a clean finger. Softly. Oops, got some more brown in there. Never mind. There's some trees and growth down through there. So I'm just going to grab my dark green and put a little bit of a tree here. So you can see that's like a tall, skinny tree up through there. And just little dabs, little dots like this with your pastel. Nice and loose. And there's some other trees that come up the side there, isn't there? And it comes up to here, actually. It's quite tall. Bits of trees through there, bits of greenery. So we can put some greenery in there. Like that. It just softens things off. It looks really nice and it tells us that there's land and trees and whatever over there beyond the water. Okay, I'm going to put a bit of this lighter green just at the base here between the two rocks. It's like grasses through there. A bit grassy. And then I might grab my darkest green, which is this beautiful soft green, another blue earth pastel, and just darken up into this green up here. A little bit darker up through there. That kind of runs into the edge of the rocks there, so you can kind of blend them a little bit through there too. Stuff like that. That's nice. Just going to sharpen up the edge of this rock face through here. Just want to darken that right off at the tip there. Lovely. Lovely, lovely. Okay, so we can see that that sort of continues on through there. And the water, I don't know if you've noticed this, but the water comes up like that remember this rocks on the right sit a little bit higher than the rocks on the left. So we've got to make sure we get that water line. I'm just doing it in a very light blue so you can see what I'm talking about up through here. And then the rocks on the left come down. So let me put this down first. And I need a bit of blue, like sky blue in here. So we'll put a bit of sky blue in there. And that kind of comes down through here. In there. I want to get that bit of water there between the two rocks kind of done, so then we can come forward and put the rest of this, the bottom of this rock face on the left down lower. But I need to get the water in there first, so I don't have to try and get in around the corner later, if you know what I mean. So see if you can get some of your water in round through there like that. Using some of the blue and a little bit of the lighter blue or white, whatever you've got. I just want to get that bit up through there done. Make sure you've got a nice clean finger before you blend. Getting all mixed up with my browns, but never mind. So then I can bring this down. I'll show you how in a sec. So I tip off more dust. I'll use my charcoal to show you what I'm talking about. So this bit here comes down lower like that. It's not much, but it's just a tiny bit. And it sort of tells us that this rock here is in front of that one. So that one's further away at the back. And this one comes down lower. So we need to get that bit of water in there ready, done. I might have to put a bit more in. Let me have another look at this. This is when you want to be using pastels that have like a really nice point or a sharp end on them, or pencils, if that's what you've got, to get into that pointy bit back there. And then it sort of comes back, if you look over here at your right side, comes back in behind there. Then we've got dark water coming around there. And then there's a bit more blue sort of through there. So I'm just going to block in where the blue water sits first. And I know some of it will need some light added to it, and some of it will need some dark, and that's okay. But just get this blue in first. And then we can figure out where to put the other colours. So this blue comes all the way down through here like this, doesn't it? Because that's reflecting the sky. So again, I'm just blocking that in for now. So we're moving down into the water. I'm just going to clean my fingers off a little bit because they're all dirty and dark. It's making my water dirty. Dip off my dust. Okay. So I'm going to blend this in now because I want the water to be nice and smooth. I've got pastel all up my arm. Okay, so I'm just going to softly, gently blend this in, trying not to pick up too much of the browns and the dirty colours into the blues. It's going to happen eventually, I'm sure. But anyway, I'm just pulling that across. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling it in a horizontal direction because that's the direction the water is, isn't it? The shapes in the water is that ripple that goes from left to right horizontally. So that's the sort of feeling we want to start to get in through the water. That beautiful horizontal ripple effect. Lovely. All right, that's coming together nicely now. It's starting to look like it's going to be something, finally. All right. Before we get further down into the front here, we need to focus on this area up here. So everything just below the rocks. So around the base of the rocks, you can see it's really quite dark, isn't it? It's really black in there. So what if I get my blue violet and just really blacken that off? What I'm trying to do is create a really strong line between the dark rock and the light water. Okay, so I need to blacken the edges off in there to make that nice and strong. And same on the other side. It's fairly black in there too. Now you might want to use a dark pencil if you have one. I'm doing it with pastel, trying to make it nice and smooth. Or small, I should say, small marks. That dark edge around the bottom of the rocks will really help to make the water glow. Remember, dark against light makes the light pop. So I'm just darkening off down through here. Want that really, really dark. Yummy, yummy. And up through here, behind where that little tree's got to go. Some nice dark bits in there. I'm back in the rocks now, mucking around with the darks. Which we can do anytime. Okay, so I'm just going to tip off my dust first, and then we'll put some that little sandbank in the grass and the tree on that left side. Okay, so what have we got? There's some green here. Sort of there. So it closes the gap between the grass and the rocks, doesn't it? There's no water to be seen between those two from here. Although the green does have a slight shine on the edges of it. So I'll use a lighter green across the top like that. Might be a bit too bright, we'll see. Can always quieten it down if it is. Just dab that softly. And then we've got a sandbank, which I don't know if I picked up a colour for that. Anyway, we'll try the apricot and see what happens. A bit of sand here. Just goes across like that. Okay. And then we've got some grass. So there's grass across the top of the sandbank. It goes up in front of the rocks there. A bit more grass, green. It's nice to have some green through there. Something like that. And I'm also going to put the tree in. So how tall is the tree? It comes to about here. I'm going to just put a few. This is the darker, not darkest green. It's kind of the mid green. Putting that in first, and then I'm going to put lighter green over the top to get the highlights in. But it kind of just grows about there. Has got some little tree branches you can see as well. Try the apricot through there, just catching the light. Not very strong, but a little bit of that going on. And dab that in and soften it off. It's a bit much. And I have this brighter green here. I'm going to try that one and see what happens. Because this is all getting closer to us now, so we can do a little bit more information. So just lightening up some of those leaves on the tree, making the foliage a bit shiny. Keep your marks sort of random. Try not to have patterns and create the same size bunches of leaves. Try to keep it looking as natural as you can. It's really hard because we're humans and we like making patterns. It just comes naturally to us. But it's really good to try not to if you can help it. And put some of this light green down in the grass as well. So that's looking all right. Don't mind that tree. It's all right, it'll do. A bit of dark green dabbed around in there. Trees are tricky. There, that's nice. So 3 greens in my tree. Started with a mid, added to some light, and then a little bit of dark for shadow. Again, try to keep your marks random and a bit loose. Bit of dark down in the grass there. the base of the tree. And now in front of the grass along here is quite dark. Now this is a dark green I'm using. It's really quite dark through there. And then at the edge of that sandbank, it's quite dark around here too. Isn't it? It has sort of a dark purplish, greenish kind of colour. So I'm just going to use a bit of both of those and push that in like this. Just to give it that little edge of darkness. If you've lost some of your sand like I did, come back over with your sandy colour. Put a patch more back in here and there. Again, try to keep that random. You don't want it all flat sandy looking. It's, you know, different contours and bumps and lumps and things like that through it. Okay. Just darken off underneath the green grass as well, because that's quite dark in the foreground there. And then I'm going to zhoosh a bit of green, light green, just across here. Just across the top there. Like that. Then we can get stuck into the water. Right. So that's enough foliage and bits and pieces over that side. Just going to kind of push all this in. Just want to. I know I'm making the water a bit dirty, but I can brighten that up afterwards. There's quite a lot of dark through the water as well. Okay, so that's just put more blue on my fingers now to clean them off. Now we're going to look at the water. So the water is reflecting the rocks, obviously. So that means that we can use those rocky colours through there. So let's start with the brown. I'm going to put some brown just through here. So when you put it on, just wipe it on its side like this. Don't want too much, okay? Just put a little bit down through there, like that. And then I'm going to pick up the apricot colour. So that's this lighter colour. So it's reflecting some of the shiny parts of the rocks through here. Looking at the water and the shades or tones you can see in there. Okay. Just pushing that around through there. That greeny grassy colour is down through here. It's amazing how many colours you can see in this water once you start looking, isn't it? Like that. We're going to push all this in a minute, blend it in, and then we can add more over the top. So we're sort of going to make a bit of a muddy mess. Put a bit of green in here too, just for fun. It looks a bit greenish to me here at the foreground. Like that. There's also a bit of dark. Bit of dark through there. I know it needs to be darker than this, but I'm just going to put some of the brown there to indicate that dark area through there. And then we've got some dark through there. And then we've got dark over on this side. We've got it at the base of the rock and then over through here. Through there too. So have you got some greenish colours over here on the left? Then some of your brown, your reddy brown. And I can see some darker purpley colours through there and there. Like that. That's my blue violet. It's probably a bit too dark, but never mind. A bit through there as well. And there. Okay. And then there's a bit of darker over here. And definitely here in front of this rock in the water. Lovely, lovely. And then that comes over there like that. A little bit of dark in here, just a tiny bit. It goes like that, doesn't it? Just really looking at those colours in the water. Yum, yum. Okay, so what we're going to do is push this in and we're going to pull it across. So we want to go in a horizontal direction to follow the ripples of the water. So we're going to pull all these colours into each other. Okay, just keep coming across like this and see how we go. So let's start up here at the base of the rock. It's going to go across like this. And then across here. And if you want to lift off in between whites, do that. It's going to go like this. And it should start to get some of those ripples happening automatically because we're pulling it in a horizontal direction. See how it's all going a bit blurry? So that's what we want. We want a nice blurred sort of watery effect with all these beautiful colours through there. Okay, so remember, stay horizontal, side to side. Just move your fingers side to side like this. And it's all getting a bit muddy and a bit dirty, but that's okay because we can come back over it and lighten up some of those bluer areas. Just make sure on the sides, if you feel like you haven't quite covered the paper, maybe you want to add a bit more pastel or just start to blend it in a bit more, but just keep running your finger or your hands left to right. Don't go up and down, don't go round and round because you'll lose the shape of the water or the movement. You can see already how that's starting to look like it's got some reflections in it. Yeah. Okay, now I'm going to tip off my dust. Lovely. Now what we want to do is to darken up even more some of those darker spots. So it's all gone kind of a bit mid-tone now. So we want to get a bit darker in some spots to create this drama that we want to make. So I've got my dark purple. You can see there's a dark area just there. There's like blue water at the base of the rock. And then it goes dark just across there. And then it goes dark here in front of the grass a little bit more. So I'm just going to go darken through there. So what I'm doing is I'm holding the pastel in my hand and then I'm pulling it across with my free finger. So can you see what I'm talking about? Those two dark sections through there. We want to keep it all fairly blurred and soft. Okay, so there's a bit more dark here, like a dark purple there, and a bit running up through here. So just keep your mark quite light. Just marking out the darkest parts I can see, where I'm going to start to really blend more in. Okay, now I've got that on there, I'm just going to tip the dust off because it's very dry. That's also an Art Spectrum Extra Soft. They come in a big square or rectangle like that. Very, very crumbly, especially that colour. It's always quite crumbly and dusty. And then I'm going to pull this across again like this. And I'm keeping my finger on the paper because I want to create that continuous ripple of the colours. Like that. Yummy. Now I've done that, I'm going to come back over this now with my apricot colour. As you can see the two orange stripes pretty much through the water there. I'm just dabbing it on lightly like this. Yeah. Softly, softly. Not too heavy because I don't want it to be too strong. It's got to blend in with all the other ripples and colours. something like that. Okay, I'm going to put more of that greeny color over in here because I feel like I want more green through there. That's a little bit of do it, then muck it up, then do it again until you sort of get it looking the way you want it. It's a bit of toing and froing really with water. You keep going over and over and over it. This ochre colour seems to be in the foreground a little bit, just through here. Okay, now I'm going to push all this in again, and then I'll come back over with the blue, because the blue is the thing that's going to kind of dominate. Pushing, pushing, pushing. Don't press too hard. If you press hard, you'll just push the colour in too far, and it'll get a bit muddy looking. I just want to go nice and light. Yes.
Sorry, Jeanne, are you just, when you put your fingers down, are you going from right to left and then lifting your hand and then going back to the right, or?
A bit of both.
Okay.
Yeah, at the moment, I'm not really lifting off at all. I'm just keeping my fingers on the paper, but very light.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Depending on whether you've got darks on your fingers or not?
Yeah, so they're a bit grubby now.
Okay, yeah, okay, thanks.
That's all right. Thanks for asking all the questions. I love it. It's great. Okay, so now we've done that, and I've pulled my fingers across left to right, right to left, to create the feeling of the ripples of the water. So it's the direction, isn't it? It's all about the direction of everything. You've always got to think about the shapes and the directions, and then move your fingers around in that direction. All right, so now we need to get some more blue in here, because we've got to blue this up again. But to do that, instead of like wiping it all on like mad, I'm going to line my pastel down in that direction, so horizontal, and pull it across like this. Okay, and just notice where the blue is. So we're not going to go over everything. We're just going to find the blue areas. So you can see there's a blue section in front of this rock face here. Then we've got a dark patch, and then we have all this bit of blue that comes around through here. So I'm just softly, softly putting some blue around in there like that. Then a tad more up in here on the right-hand side and up between the rocks there. We'll add the lighter blue also when we want to highlight the light sections. And then we're going to come across like this. So what I'm trying to do is create the feeling of the ripples through this section here. Because you can see, if you look at the ripples in the picture, they've got dark underneath them. It's almost like stripes of different tones of blue in that area there. And so they're picking up the colours of the water of underneath. So I've just done some not hard lines, just soft lines like that, using the pastel on its side, lying down and wiping it across in that area there. So this section here is where all the blue is coming through, and that's because it's reflecting from the sky through that crevice there. Okay, so let's tip off some dust again. And then very lightly, again with my finger, I'm just going to pull it across. I don't want to blend it too much. I want to let this blue kind of sit on the top without blending in underneath too much. You might need to wipe your finger off in between swipes so that you're not putting dark back into the light areas, etc. So I'm just pulling that across like that. I'm wiping, pull, wipe. So now I'm lifting off. Starting on the right, pulling across to the left. Pull, wipe. And hopefully that's going to start to give me the feeling of water and the ripples through the water. It's coming together quite well. Now, once you've got that going on, then we can come back in with the lightest blue. So this is that pale blue that we used initially. You can see up here, right on the crevice where the rocks join, there's a little bit of lighter blue through there. Make sure you've got a clean finger and just softly pull that across. A little bit more through here. Pulling across softly. And then we've got quite a lot of, there's a little block, isn't there, of the lighter blue just through there. So that'll be reflecting the lighter sky at the base. About there. See if I can push that in without making too much mess. Trouble is when you pick your finger up, stop and start all the time, you leave fingerprints in it. So you've either got to start right off the edge of the page and pull it across, or try really hard not to leave your fingerprint, so you can vary the pressure. You can start off really light and press a bit harder so you don't get that hard fingerprint mark where you started. Now I'm just going to use the edge of my blue, my pale blue, put some very gentle little lines in there. Again, running left to right, horizontal. And softly, softly, softly blending them in. And then coming over it again to get some light back in there. So what we're trying to do is create these little ripples of light. And they're all uneven, aren't they? They're not the same size. They're all slightly different. So you just want to vary your mark slightly to get that soft variation of the ripple through here. Now there's also some lighter marks or blues through here. So you can see where the blues vary a little bit, and see that like stripes almost, aren't they, through that water? So doing that kind of thing with your light blue, lying it flat and just pulling it across like that. And before I blend, I'm going to get my other blue and do the same thing. So they start to sort of merge together a little bit. So you haven't got just light blue there, you've got a bit of both. So now you've got a nice range of blues running through there. Like that. And then I can just softly pull across. Softly, softly, wiping off between each one, so I don't dirty my paper too much. So that's quite nice. I'm just looking at the picture here, so you can see there's quite a few lots of ripples. See the ripples through there? Like a zigzag shape almost on those areas there where it's got the apricot-y colour. So let's have a crack at putting some more of that back in. And do that, and then I want to keep it kind of loose. Keep the edges a little bit soft, something like that. So just lightly mark in those little areas. Nice, nice. And then on the other side over here, it's the same sort of thing going on with the greens. You just want to make the lines lovely and soft. And they kind of get further apart as they get closer to us, don't they? Like that. And a bit more dark. So it's lots of touching and, softening off and then coming back again and touching it up. This sort of water takes a long time to do. Now I'm just going to pull this across. I probably should be cleaning my finger off in between each one, but never mind. I think that's looking pretty nice. I want to darken off a little bit between these two apricot sort of areas. There's a bit definite dark stripe or line through there. Probably a bit more apricot on this side. So just touching up, always touching up, softly, softly. And then we can just gently pull those, or hopefully they'll sort of merge together and look like they've got ripples in the water. What I'm doing now is going left to right. So left to right, lift off, clean. Right to left, clean. Left to right, clean. Right to left, clean. Left to right, clean. Oh, that's nice. That starts to create that lovely ripply sort of feeling, doesn't it? Lovely. So I think we're just about nearly there. I might just get a bit more blue in here. Could potentially grab another blue, I reckon, because there's a little bit of dark blue kind of either side of the light blue in there. I haven't used dark blue anywhere else, so I might just throw the purple in and see what that does. Just a tiny bit, tiny, tiny. Such a crumbly colour and such a strong colour. You've got to be really careful. Don't put too much in. So just a dab, and then I'm just going to pull it across to try and darken that little bit of blue off in there. Very easy to make mud when you're doing this, because we can press too hard. You can mix your colours around too much and it just turns to mud. So that's the problem, I guess, with pastels. It's just learning when to pull off and when not to keep going, you know, when to stop and when to leave it alone. And sometimes I don't even know when that is, obviously, because I'm still going. But it's good to kind of get your head around that and learn that, so that you know when you've come to the end. Just refining some of this water, you can see there's some really cute little blue shapes here on the edges, just in there, quite like that. And it's kind of a greeny ochre colour either side of it, which is obviously reflecting the rocks and probably whatever's underneath. More rocks, no doubt. Lovely. Then we've got to put our grasses in at the front. So if you've got some spray fixative, you might want to spray this section here so you can get a nice fine line of grasses over the top of your pastel if it's not, if it's too thick. You've got some dust. See how we go. So the grasses, I think I might do them in this light green and a bit of this green. Probably use all my greens, to be honest. So when you're doing grasses, what you want to do is use the end or the tip of your pastel, because they're a fine line, aren't they? And we're just going to work out how tall they are and just do lines like that. So just soft, fine, wispy kind of lines like this. I'm going to do it in dark green first, and then I'll come over with lights to pick up some highlights and put them in. So just some soft marks like that. Oh, that was my mid-green. I'll try a bit of dark now. Again, try to keep your marks kind of natural looking, soft. Don't press too hard. Try to get like a tapered end on it almost. So when you put it down, you lift off quickly. So you get these lovely soft little tips. That's nice. And then I can come over with my lighter green, my lightest green, and just highlight. See that? It's going to highlight some of those grasses that are catching the sun. It's quite lush and thick, so I can thicken that up. Like that, and then maybe use this green to get some bright back in there. Probably putting too much in now, but never mind. Add another bit of light just to highlight some of those. Press harder when you want it to be brighter. So where you want that light colour to just pop, press a little bit firmer, and that'll give you a darker or stronger colour. It's a bit too curly, that one. There we are. And we've got these little, I don't know what they are, flowery things on the tips. I'm just going to use this apricot colour and see if that will do what I need it to do. Just little dabs like this, little soft, fluffy kind of dabs with your pastel. This is very soft, another Blue Earth. You might have realised I kind of like that brand. And they are beautiful. They're available at softpastels.com.au online. Get them singly or in beautiful sets of, you know, all greens and all oranges, and they're glorious. I bought the greens a few years back and I just love them. There's some really lovely greens in there. So that's the apricot colour. I'm going to throw a bit of the light, see if the light green will be enough to brighten that up. Might not be, but we'll try it anyway. Maybe. It's nice for a mid-tone. No, it's not enough. Bit of orange maybe. Orange. Yeah, that'll do. That kind of ties in then with the rocks and the colours we've already used. Again, you don't have to do exactly the same colour of flowers and stuff that you see in pictures. You might want to change it to suit. That's all right, that'll do. Nice. Again, don't overdo it. Just keep it simple, soft, not too much. And I think we're just about done. I could potentially spend some more time over here in the water, getting some of those ripples to really, you know, crease together. I'm just using the end of my pastel now and drawing these little blue lines sort of out to the edges like that. Lovely. Lovely, nice. Yeah, good. And then I can tip off my dust. And if some of those lines are a bit too sharp, I can soften them off a little tiny bit. Like that. You might want to add a bit more light. See, I'm mucking around now, fiddling. Secret with water like this is to not press too hard. Keep your touch really light. All right, I reckon I'm going to call that done for now. Make sure you sign it. That was charcoal, probably not the best option because it doesn't kind of stick so well when you put it over the top of pastel. Let's try to see if I've got a black pencil. And pastel pencil often won't work either if you haven't got enough. If you've got, oh, that one's not too bad. There we go. Lovely. So I hope you've enjoyed today's class. I've enjoyed delivering it to you, and I think, you know, it's been a really nice little exercise, this one. Lovely picture. Thank you to what's her name? Janice Churchwood Photography. It's on your notes, the lady who provided the photo in the Australian Reference Photos group on Facebook. So if you're looking for things to paint, you want some inspiration, head over there. There's heaps to see. It's amazing. And I just want to thank everybody for coming today. It's been lovely, this 6-week course. I've really enjoyed meeting you and getting to know you more if I didn't already. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. So I'll finish recording and then I'll come back to everybody. Thanks for joining me. Oh, and if you are looking for more classes, please head over to my website, which is at deliciousart.com.au. Look under the videos tab and you'll find a lot of video classes there ready to go. Okay, see you soon.